Okay, so there's that, and I can do the same again here inside here. Shift and click and shift and click. B for the brush, and we've got a little shading there. So you can go on and on and on. So that's really why you want to use this technique. Let's say we want to do a little shading on this. B brush. So if you take the time to like set this up in Illustrator, if you're good with Illustrator and can do this, that's great. But it again lets you get a really good clean paint technique really quickly. Like I can go in and do this shading pretty quickly. If I wasn't talking and trying to do this, I'd probably be going a lot faster. But I can just go in and click on these areas, select them, and do some shade. There's that. Again, select there, back to B, brush. And again, W calls up the lasso. Get both of those sections by shift clicking. B again for the brush. Okay, so that's how I might do the shading. Now, a really important thing that you need to know, need to understand, is that I'm using 2 layers, okay? But what I'm able to do is click here and select that area because there's nothing on this top layer, okay? Now, if I go in and click where I've painted, where I've done some shadow stuff, here, see what happens? Is now it's seeing this new color value and it's selecting a much more limited range. Okay, so what that would do is it would say I want to go back and change a color or something. It's going to prevent me from doing that. Okay, so I'm not going to get that good clean selection anymore. But because I'm working on layers, I know I can turn shadows off. I've got my flat color again. I can go back, click and select it. And then if I want to change the color on the layer, let's say we change the color of the gun, I could do that, do a hue and saturation and change it because I'm working on the layer with the color. Okay? But by keeping these separate, like all you're painting on one layer, and that's what that looks like. So this is all my painting. By keeping that on its own layer, I can take that off and click here and select. Okay. The other important thing to understand is what you could do. Let's say we're going to do a highlight layer. So let's do highlights. Highlights, and it's good to name your layers still. So let's go here, move that up on top. Oh, I moved some stuff, so let's undo that. Let's see. Yeah, I moved the layer somehow, so let me undo that. Okay, now we're back in place. So let's do a new layer and do highlight. Okay, I want to do my highlights. I know that I need to turn off the shadows so I can get that good clean selection. Now what you could do is you could go here and click to select and then click back on your highlights. That wastes time. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to click to like stay on your highlight layer, but click and grab this color. Up at the top, this button here is what allows that sample all layers. What that means is the wand tool will take into account every layer that's visible. If I turn that off and click on highlight, now to, let's say I want to select the vest. If I turn sample all layers off and click, it selects the entire layer because there's nothing in there, so it's all the same value. Okay, that's not what we want. We want to stay on this layer and click and have it read the colors underneath. So if you turn sample all layers on, now it's when it's clicking to read it, it will read both layers. And that's how I'm able to go in and select individual colors, but still work on my highlight layer, not have to jump back and forth every time I want to select something. Okay, So let's say I'm going to do a little bit of highlight work here. Let's select his face. And again, we've got things protected because we've got the selection. So I'm going to pick white, and I'm going to do a highlight layer. I'm going to get my brush, and I'm just going to go and do like a highlight right down the front of his face, and maybe a little bit, and I can change my brush size here and put a little bit of a highlight there and kind of define the ear a little more. And again, this makes it easier to do the painting without a tablet or a stylus. When you're having to paint with a mouse, being able to make these really clean selections really helps. Okay, so there's my highlights that I was able to get. I can go in and let's say you want to put a highlight on his arm. I can hit W again to grab my wand, B for the brush. Sometimes if I'm going to do these highlights, I like a great big brush that I can then put outside quite a bit. Sometimes that just makes it easier to get a smoother line. Okay, and that's a little hard to see. But what you can do is if you undo that, you can toggle between it by doing undo and redo. The other thing you can do is sometimes this moving line called the marching ants, sometimes that gets in your way. So if I don't want to see that, I want to hide it temporarily, you can go to select, let's see, somewhere there's a hide selection, or there used to be. Let's see, view, there it is, selection edges. That'll hide it, okay? Or you can go in and view, let's see, show them again, show selection edges. On your keyboard on a Mac, it's Command H. It'll hide it. Command H will bring it back. Okay. Now you may get a dialog box the first time you do that. It wants to hide the application or hide extras. Click the button that says hide extras. But that's a good way to kind of, hide that, and helps you get a much clearer view of what's going on. Okay. And then, just like everything else, just combine those layers to kind of keep building on your detail. A couple other things you want to notice. When I brought this image in, it was a vector. So what it did, it read all of those vector shapes and created pixels for those. What I didn't have was a background that was 8.5 inches by 11. So that's why we're seeing this on this layer here. That's why we're seeing this checker board pattern, because that's transparent. There are no pixels there. So a couple ways you can deal with that is, what you can do is, because that's transparent, that means you can create a new layer, put it behind layer 1, which is your background layer, and then you could go in and pick a color, fill it, and there you've got a background color. Then you can go in and adjust that with hue and saturation, and all your image adjustments for color are up here under image adjustments. There's a pop-out window there, and so that's where you can go in and kind of find some things and adjust there. So that's one helpful thing. If you don't want to do that and you just want it to be white, what you can do is go to this image, and what will happen is, if you flatten the image, you don't want to do that. What will happen is, when you're finished, what you can do is, if you just want a white background again, you can do a new layer and fill it with white. And then when you finish and save it out as a JPEG or flatten it, it'll have that background in. So that's probably your easiest thing to do. Or you could put a white square in your Illustrator document and give it an actual background. But yeah, this probably is the simplest thing, is if you get that transparency, just create a new layer and drag it underneath and fill it with whatever color you want to fill it with. Okay, so there's that. So that's the basic technique. It's pretty simple. It's really handy and it really will allow you to do a lot and keep your illustration really clean. Now I do want to show you the difference between not anti-aliasing and anti-aliasing. So this is the one we worked on that was not anti-aliased, right? This is the one that when I opened it, I turned anti-aliasing on. I clicked the button. Just show you that again. So if I bring my image in, open and hit anti-alias and turn it on, what I'm going to get is it looks the same from far off, right? Again, I showed you that earlier. But again, when we zoom up, what we're going to see is where these colors start to blend. And this is a good one to look at right here. Now, what's going to happen is if I go in and use my wand tool, this is W, and click here with my tolerance of 1, what happens is, again, it only selects those colors. Okay? But I want just a solid black. So what's going to happen is, let's say I wanted to change his eyes to blue. On this guy here, with that tolerance of 1, I could click, click, and then I could get some blue and get a blue brush and go in and paint his eyes blue really quickly. Okay? And it's all good and clean because I've got that good clean selection. But on the anti-aliased version, if I just click to make that selection, shift click, what's going to happen is when I paint those, we're going to start to get this garbage here where it didn't make a complete selection. Okay? So you get some weird, start to get some weird stuff happening. If I do the same thing on his ears, here and here, like before I was able to click, like shift click there to get both of those. On the anti-aliased version, if I do that with the exact same settings, what I get is click, click. If I delete that, oh, let me see. This is all the other stuff that it doesn't select. Okay? And if I were to go in and try to do that shadow again on there, what I'm going to get is a lot of this imprecise stuff here that doesn't get painted. So that's why you want to make sure that when you use this technique, you turn anti-aliasing off when you import it. So hopefully you found this to be a new technique that you can use to your benefit, especially if you're good with Illustrator. And a lot of people are really good with Illustrator and they struggle with drawing traditionally with a pencil and pen. But a lot of people use Illustrator really well. So this is a way that you can capitalize on that particular skill you may have already spent a lot of time kind of working on, and then bring it into Photoshop and really start to treat your Illustrator drawings like a more painterly drawing. So I'll encourage you to try this technique out, especially if you know Illustrator, and I believe everybody in the class should have had an Illustrator class by now, but I'm not positive. So, and then once you do it, you're still back in Photoshop, and you would go in, and once your illustration is finished, you could go and go to File, and you want to save as, and for me, you want to save it as a JPEG. You may or may not get this dialog box. I always hit save on your computer. So go in and save it as a JPEG. That's what you'll send to me. You might want to keep a PSD Photoshop document for yourself to go back in and play. It'll keep your layers, but what I want from you is a JPEG. So save it as a JPEG with your name and either project 4 or assignment 4, however you want to name that. And save it and use the high or maximum's fine and do that. And that's what you'll turn in. All right. And if you have any questions about this technique, drop me a line, shoot me an email, ask me a question, and I'll be happy to help. All right. Thanks.